want to talk about Bottega Veneta. A recent show.
Okay, coming.
Well, I do not know what you think about it. Tell me down below. It's not very typical Bottega. Hello. It's kind of boring actually. So welcome back to my huge channel.
And
yeah, I see what to say. Hello. Welcome back.
Okay, let's talk something else.
Can I just start, please?
No, okay.
Can you please stop interrupting me?
Hello.
Hello. Welcome back to my huge channel. Today I want to talk about Bottega Veneta's recent show. I know it's been a while, but I think it's still interesting for some of you. I think it's a super interesting show because I think it's not very typical Bottega, and what we see in this collection is like the true identity of the brand somehow, even though it seems like it's not that obvious and strong than the collections before, but we're going to talk about it right now. As you know, many shows of the last collection couldn't be shown in form of the typical runways with the typical viewers and guests and rows. And I think many brands tried to recreate that still and wanted to give us the feeling as if there happened a runway. We saw that at Fendi, at Miu Miu. I think Prada also tried to recreate it a bit more runway-like, but Daniel Lee obviously hates the digital world. We have seen that with Instagram and their shutdown of everything digital that they do right now, which is also pretty interesting in my opinion, and a very good and intelligent move, but that's another topic. Well, he hates the virtual and digital world, and I think that we can see that pretty well in the collection that he has shown. It is very dark, not like the runways that we're used to see of him, and also the color code changed immense in my opinion. And he tried to create a lot more intimate and saloon-like feeling, like, you know, the runways that we were used to see in the very early times of fashion, that was for a way smaller crowd and not like for the media and everyone who has like a popular name. So he tried to create this very dramatic and still intimate feeling, also with lighting and music by Nene Cherry, which is very striking in my opinion. I think it's a very important tool by showing his collection, and I think it's not only about the clothing here. He's very product centric actually, Daniel Lee, while designing, but I think here we do see like a very strongly conceptualized runway show from a theatrical perspective. We see that at the moment the show starts, there are still some guests with masks on, and there are people sitting with huge space gaps, of course, and Lee sent out prior to his runway huge large canvas totes with ingredients, with great ingredients in them that we all wished to have, and there were books in them, and I think that's super interesting. I think he kind of wanted his guests and viewers and all the other people to kind of prepare for the show, because he was well aware that we will not see maybe the classical striking designs that we were used to see of Lee, but more that the message and what he tries to tell us is here focused. So that's why there were like 4 books in this huge canvas, and there was a whole lot of stuff in there inspired where Lee got his inspiration from. For example, stuff from the German photographer and conceptual artist Rosemarie Trockel, or another book where he had inspirational photos of his models, or other designers that Lee has accumulated his start at Bottega with. There were pictures like of PJ Harvey in them, and well, I guess these were all things that kind of inspired Daniel Lee, and that he wanted to share to get a better vision of what he wanted to create here exactly. And in this whole collection, Lee said that he went for the strategy of product first. So he only sees the product, and there's a huge concentration on the physical object, which is key in the show. I think if we have a look at the best-selling items of Bottega Veneta, we are all well aware that these are the shoes, the handbags, and maybe the coats. But here we see very well how a strategy concentrated on physical objects and, you know, very product concentrated design can work very well, because, I mean, you know, the handbags and shoes are everywhere, and they're also very well designed and well deserved to be focused on. What we also saw in this collection were dresses that were kind of built up on the hips. It made a kind of awkward appearance to me, but apparently this should be an Tudor reference. I think we all have seen the Tudors and Henry VIII, and Vogue Runway says it's an allusion to Henry VIII, which I think is pretty interesting because I wouldn't assume it the first time I've seen it. And obviously Lee just had some historical inspiration that he wanted to include in the designs of the dresses especially. I think what is also pretty striking in this collection is that Lee draped his models in very soft knitwear and very chunky chain kind of stitched sweaters, which is pretty contrasting to what we saw before. I mean, if we think of the prior collections, he used a lot of leather, a lot of kilts and padded items, all fabrics and garments that we kind of associate with a more strong, more masculine and textured tailoring, for example. Other garments and fabrics he used weren't maybe not that post-pandemic associated, in my opinion. They were still a little bit edgy and were still speaking the typical language of Daniel Lee. And what I also find pretty striking is that we saw a hell lot of green in this collection. If you ordered something of Bottega, which I have recently, you will realize that he also changed the whole corporate identity of the brand. They kind of use this neon-like green as their branding color, which is a beautiful color in my opinion, and we see a lot of this green in the collection. And well, what I personally think is that Daniel also has to kind of distance himself from his own designs because they got copied so extremely in the previous seasons by all other designers, by fast fashion retailers. We all like that very beige and natural color, and a still very strong, feminine and sometimes masculine appearance. But I think now that he has seen that places at Zara, H&M, they all have like almost the same things and color palettes and cuts, he needs to find something new. I think after 1 year now, he realized that he needs to step up his game, and that's why he has colors like peach and green and other very striking colors that we're actually not that used to see in his previous collections. So I think that was pretty striking. And another style where I think that Daniel Lee is kind of adapting to this pandemic feeling are the shoes. The shoes that were like best-selling in the last seasons were also like with the tiny little straps and pretty high heels. And I think he realized that he can't bring these kind of styles out anymore. It's really not... it doesn't really suit to the time we live in, so he had these clog-like shoes that seem pretty practical and functional. So I think we can see here clearly that he also adapted to the situation we are all in. I mean, that's also why the show was held in London and not in Milan, for example, because he moved to Milan for his new job at Bottega, but since well, he couldn't really work there, he came back to London, and that's where they also made the show.
They don't have the virus in London?
I think I actually liked most of the looks. They weren't groundbreaking. They have these huge knits and it's very different. We haven't seen that too often yet, but to me it's not appealing. I get very strong 70s vibes. I like the color coding a lot. I like to see color in general because, as I said, we weren't used to see that at Daniel Lee's shows usually. So he changed and stepped that game up. We still saw some good tailoring. I like the boiler suit kind of looks. I heard in some reviews that people didn't like the tailored cuts because they were too stiff and still too tight, but I think, you know, there was so much crochet going on that little bit of stiffness is totally fine. And I think when you try to tailor very well, it needs to be in some certain ways also tight. So I think we have to deal with that, and I think it suits very well to that 70s, 60s flair he had with his midi skirts and the fitting jackets. In general, I have to say there wasn't any certain item I find extremely beautiful or striking or different to me, which I think is pretty sad because we all know that Daniel Lee actually has a huge potential. The only thing interesting about his crochet is, for example, that he actually studied knitwear at Central St. Martin's. So, I mean, if he's not knitting, who is? Even though I have to say that it is not the most generic fashion design still, it was also not very inspiring in my opinion. Well, I do not know what you think about it. Tell me down below how you find this collection. What do you think about it? Also the installation, which is, I think, in my opinion, the most interesting part about it, you know, releasing these books of the inspirations you had, of the models, the photographers, working with a huge photographer and artist together, and capturing these things in great photos and a video is like the best thing about this. And I think I like this green color because I think that's really beautiful. So Daniel Lee really chose a very great color as the corporate identity, and it was fine to see some of the colors also on the models, but the cuts and the designs didn't really convince me. Tell me down below if you think any differently. I hope you also like this kind of content where I want to put the runway show actually on focus, because I think many of you really love the runway shows, and I also do, and sometimes it's just better to not see this phase and just look at the runway and have a look at the models walking around, you know, maybe it's a bit easier for you. And if you also like this kind of content, watch my other videos where I also talk about, again, Bottega and many others. And if you don't like to just grab yourself a coffee or something, go now. Nobody knows that Comedy Central sketch, I think.
You have to bring it in.
Can I have it? You know, that sketch is like the best sketch of mankind. It might
Next
be.
to Gives the Money.
Gives the Money, yeah, Gives the Money is also famous. My German friends, you know, Gives the Money, the old stuff. I'm so old.
Yeah,
they don't know.
Good. You have to put it at the beginning of
Gives the Money.
Yeah, and both of them.
Ah, actually I have to. Yeah, I also thought of that once, but then I was like, no one's getting it. But maybe they should just get it.